Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the mighty Gluestick channel. I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore full-time and have a collection of over 700 videos on monster ecology, fantasy world history, character classes and magical items on my channel. If you like what I do, please consider becoming a member of the channel by clicking the join button down below or backing me on Patreon, where you can get access to all of the scripts I write for these vids. Members of either also become members of the secretive Gluminati on my Discord server, which has been upgraded and optimized for your personalized games. Of course, subscribe to me here as I upload at least twice a week and have a live stream every weekend. Here is a creature your players are going to absolutely hate. Not because it is a particularly evil or formidable monster, it's actually neutral in alignment and quite placid, a peaceful animal that, when not attacked or provoked, is about as threatening as a cow. However, the Disenchanter, as the name suggests, is the absolute bane of adventurers who love their magic items, because that energy is exactly what the Disenchanter feeds on. Originally appearing in the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition Fiend folio, dating back to 1979, the Disenchanter is a curious looking creature found on page 27 and invented by Roger Musson, which he originally sent into the TSR office in the United Kingdom to have published in the Fiend Factory column in the magazine called White Dwarf. This was the origins of the company now known as Games Workshop, creators of the Warhammer franchise. The Fiend folio contains all of those fantastically quirky and now quite famous creatures all in one book. The reason the Disenchanter was dreamed up is pretty obvious. Sometimes player characters end up getting magic items and powers that can seriously unbalance the game and make certain plots and stories damn near impossible. So the Dungeon Master has to come up with some logical or at least fun reason why a magic item or power then gets removed from the game. In steps the Disenchanter. You thought rust monsters were scary? Wait until you get a load of this. So grab yourself a non-magical beverage, we're about to get deeply nerdy. Collecting the combined lore of the Fiend folio, Monstrous Manual and the Pathfinder Bestiary, number 3, we can get a pretty detailed ecology of these creatures. Physically, a fully grown Disenchanter is slightly more imposing but very similar to a camel, averaging 8 feet long and about 5 feet tall at the shoulder, with shorter legs than a camel but weighing in at 1,600 pounds, which is heavier than a dromedary camel, but not as heavy as a Bactrian camel. It has a humped back, long and gangly legs and neck, and a snout very similar to a leaner version of an elephant's trunk. Unlike either, the Disenchanter also has a hide almost as thick as a rhino's, which is concealed under a shaggy layer of blue fur, thickest on the body forming a mane down the spine, but thin and sparse everywhere else. Those with keen eyes observing it under strong sunlight will be able to see a shimmer of magical potential in the air close to it, a bit like a heat shimmer. They are found in the Forgotten Realms in fairly specific areas, typically east of Anarok, mostly around the Sea of Fallen Stars. The creatures seem to have some special affinity for the area around what was once Sabrine, the site of present-day Raven's Bluff. Disenchanters return to that area in great numbers every 150 years or so. Their next mass appearance should be relatively soon, actually. The sightings already have been slowly increasing in that region, so perhaps they don't arrive all at once, but they just tend to gather and become more and more noticeable. What is known is that once every 5 years, all Disenchanters in more local areas will have similar gatherings. In times gone past, the population has been decimated time and time again because of the creature's abilities, where unscrupulous types have captured and transported them, shoved them into confined dungeons, forced them into the territory of dwarves and elves in the hopes of dwindling those races' magical defences prior to an invasion or battle, always to the doom of these gentle creatures. In cultures where wizards and sorcerers are a threat and magic is a plague, some villages have been known to keep Disenchanters as pets and mascots. Barbarians might use them to ward off wizards, and those who would gain an unfair advantage through the use of magic items rather than physical and mental prowess, or a king might employ one along with his food tasters to ensure that no guests at the gala have smuggled in dangerous magic items. They often live in relative isolation in the wild, or sad in captivity, rarely gathering or in even a small herd. They do mate for life, and depending on the food source, a pair will produce 1 or 2 calves every 3 to 5 years. The young grow into maturity quickly, reaching their full size in only 2 years. They remain with their parents until they've reached their full growth and strike out on their own shortly thereafter, though rarely you will find 2 siblings together, having left their mother a year or 2 prior. Most people firmly believe the folktale that disenchanters don't breed at all, but rather they split into two new creatures once a disenchanter has consumed enough magical energy. This is probably just because females with calves are very cautious and reclusive, avoiding any contact with humanoids while the calf is still very young. So most people have never seen one. Nobody has ever recorded any witnessed birth either. Hopefully someone will bother to set the facts to paper one day and we can all learn about it. If they have any other similarities to camels, they would have a lifespan of some 40 years or so, and that fatty hump on their back would help sustain them by storing nutrients over long periods of time in between feasts, which is quite a likely occurrence for a creature that subsists on a diet of magic. Since the Disenchanter has no known predators, its numbers are apparently controlled by the amount of magical energy available in the area. Most of the details of how it interacts with its environment are unknown. The creature's essence is purported to be useful in ink for scrolls and might be used for the fabrication of a rod of cancellation. On the world of Faerun, they appeared in the region that was being taken over by the evil faerun back in the time of the ancient Netheril Empire of Magic. So a lot of sages speculate that the faerun created them, or that the disenchanters are originally native creatures of whatever realm the faerun originally came from. But the truth is, the disenchanters are found on many worlds, mainly because they are naturally drawn to the magical emanations of mystic portals, and tend to wander into new worlds by mistake. Thus you can find them just about anywhere, and they are one of the truly pan-dimensional creatures present on every D&D world, except perhaps Eberron. The reason they have no natural predators is because they are damn near impervious to harm for non-magical sources, and even then have alien flesh that is quite inedible to beings native to Toril. It's not toxic, it just tastes revolting and causes violent gastric consequences, so native predators just ignore the disenchanters for the most part. Though there's always a young lion or tiger or land shark that will have a go at chasing one down, they will soon learn their lesson and not bother them again. Players of the game will most often encounter a disenchanter racing up to their adventuring party out of nowhere, seemingly a kind of goofy and harmless looking creature, but they will soon replace amusement with shock and alarm. Disenchanters can terrify player characters as they charge in, noses twitching, to devour the party's most important magical items. Even if the group isn't already familiar with the creatures, watching a scroll worth hundreds of gold pieces crumble to dust under the disenchanter's snout should be enough to freak the players out, and a castle that relies heavily on magic for defences or structural support may find its walls literally crumbling under the onslaught of several hungry disenchanters employed by an imposing army. Characters who have left an important magical portal open for their return may find it dull and disenchanted, with a disenchanter lounging nearby, burping after a nice rich meal. The exact method these creatures use to drain magic and digest it is a bit of a mystery, as is just how long they can survive in the wilderness where magic is not occurring spontaneously around them. But keep in mind, on the world of Toril, there are magical creatures in the wild for the disenchanter to hunt down, so it's a bit speculative, but the effects are fairly straightforward. They may hunt fairies or fey creatures and such, and fey creatures would be temporarily inconvenienced by being snacked on, but the disenchanters leave them alone and don't necessarily kill anything that they would feed on. A disenchanter is always aware of any magical auras within 60 feet. It can instantly determine the number, strength, and location of each aura. This ability is otherwise similar to the detect magic spell. When searching for magic, it basically pings the area within 120 feet with the effects of a detect magic spell, a momentary expansion of its innate senses. When it sees a party of adventurers loaded with magic items, spell effects, enchantments, or actively casting spells, it goes into feeding mode and becomes quite aggressive. Let's give this creature some stats, shall we? They're a lot smarter than they look, with an average intelligence ranging from 8 to 10. You may want to get a pen and jot this down. They have a size category large, with a strength of 18, dexterity of 10, constitution of 12, wisdom of 11, and charisma of 7, which is more like 15 when a magic-laden adventurer knows what is about to happen. The Disenchanter has an armor class of 10 and 40 hit points, with a speed of 40 feet per round and a passive perception of 10. They have a hoofed foot attack that is +6 to hit and inflicts 2d4 +4 bludgeoning damage on one target within 5 feet of them as a secondary attack each round, but the main attack is their tongue and prehensile trunk. A Disenchanter's tongue is coated with a powerful adhesive that allows it to hold creatures or items fast in order to feed. This adhesive gives the Disenchanter advantage on grapple checks and may allow them to latch onto a weapon and disarm an opponent by just snatching it out of their hands, with the target making an opposed strength check. They can use the tongue to grapple and constrict any creature of a lower size category than large. That long and sticky tongue is the strongest part of the Disenchanter, capable of actually crushing the life out of someone just like a constrictor snake. +6 to hit one target. It has a 15-foot reach, which the Disenchanter knows will catch most targets off guard and use to its best advantage. It inflicts 1d8 +4 bludgeoning damage and grapples the target with an escape DC of 16. Until the grapple ends, the target will be restrained, and the Disenchanter can choose to inflict further bludgeoning damage each round or not. Generally, if actively feeding on magic energy, it will not be inflicting crushing damage at the same time. The Disenchanter is able to tell which are the strongest magical energies and will target those first, with some exceptions. For example, they will not go after actual magical artifacts. For instance, a Disenchanter would choose to attack a longsword +3 instead of the shield +2. A Disenchanter is smart enough to attack easier targets, for example, trying to hit a magical shield in a hand rather than a magical wand in a backpack. The creature's snout is, however, very dexterous and can hit objects in somewhat difficult positions, such as a magical dagger in its scabbard with only the hilt showing. To hit a magical item, the Disenchanter makes a normal attack roll. The item's armor class is 10, adjusted by its magical bonus, if any, and by the dexterity adjustment of the individual carrying it, if any. The Dungeon Master should also adjust the item's armor class for cover, so a partially concealed item gets a +2 bonus to armor class. A mostly concealed item gets a +5 bonus to armor class, those are just standard, while a totally concealed item can't be struck by the Disenchanter. These penalties are left mostly to the Dungeon Master's discretion though, as they should. An item struck by a Disenchanter's snout is permanently drained of its magic. Items with special effects count each of those as a +1 bonus, so a +2 flying frost sword of Efreet slaying would lose those effects one by one. First the flying property, then the frost, then the Efreet slaying, and then become a +1 sword, and then just become a regular sword. Well-made sword. A Disenchanter can also target a spell effect. A lasting stationary spell effect is instantly dispelled when touched by the Disenchanter's nose. Such a spell effect has an armor class of 10 and does not harm the Disenchanter when they do so. If attacked with a spell, the Disenchanter has a chance to intercept the spell, if the spell has a visible effect. Such a spell, like even a magic missile, has a base armor class of 15. An area effect spell can't be intercepted by the Disenchanter unless the spell is targeting directly the creature. Now, you may be thinking, pretty puny, the adventurers will be able to take this thing out in a single round with that armor class and feeble hit point total. Well, there is a very good reason the creature has no natural predators. A Disenchanter can only be physically wounded by magical weapons and spells. Normal bludgeoning, piercing and slashing damage from non-magical weapons just seems to get deflected from that shimmering aura around the creature. Luckily, only the snout drains enchantments, so magical weapons are not harmed from striking the Disenchanter's body. Disenchanters are not immune to extreme cold or heat, lightning bolts, pools of acid and so on, but will barely notice a bunch of arrows and crossbow bolts being shot at them. If no magic is present, as mentioned, they are passive and gentle creatures. Some are even smart enough to understand spoken language, and there are tales of Disenchanters who have actually learned how to speak Common or Elven. The Disenchanters certainly have their own language, and when they do gather together, they share a lot of information about the wider world that each individual or mated pair have encountered on their travels. Disenchanters can carry a medium-sized humanoid or smaller and act as a mount, just as one would ride a camel, with the added advantage of not needing to feed them like a regular camel or horse. However, when the Disenchanter encounters magic, trouble is going to ensue. If you like the lore in these videos, don't forget to check out videos by fellow Forgotten Realms lore masters. Check out my channels tab where I have a list of them for you to explore, such as Mr. Rex, Dungeon Dad, Jordan, Forgotten Realms History, WebDM and World of Monsters. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you think I deserve one of those shiny silver play buttons from YouTube on my bookshelf. Check out links down below. Thank you for your support and thanks for listening. As always, I'll be back with more for you very soon.